so excited to teach you how to build dominoes, and thank you for your interest in domino art. It's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna learn the basics of how to set up dominoes, including lines, triangles, split-offs, proper spacing, and so many more tips and tricks so you can get started building your own domino projects and make some amazing creations. Now, before we even set up a domino, there's a few things that you're gonna need. First is a positive attitude and an optimistic mindset. It is super important that you're in the right headspace when you're building with dominoes, because it's very easy to get frustrated if something falls over by accident or if something doesn't work properly. But if you go into it knowing that you're going to learn from this process, that it's okay to fail, that you're actually going to become better if it fails, and you learn and you rebuild and you practice, then you're going to be set up for success. Second, you'll need a hard surface to build on, whether that's a floor or maybe a table, any kind of hard surface that doesn't have a lot of bumps or cracks or is uneven. Just make sure that if you're building on a table that it's fairly sturdy, because you don't want to bump it and accidentally knock over your dominoes. And third, you're gonna need some dominoes. I'm using my very own H5 domino creations. These are my own dominoes that I've designed specifically for setting up and knocking down. And they're different than the normal game dominoes because they don't have any dots, and they're also much more precise than these ceramic or wooden dominoes that you might find at another game store. These are gonna be harder to set up because they're not precise and they have very rounded corners. But if you're looking for toppling dominoes, I definitely recommend H5 Domino Creations. If you're interested in getting my starter set, I will leave a link down below in the description. But anyways, let's get into the most basic domino trick, the domino line. So to build a domino line, take your first domino. I like to hold the domino with my index finger and my middle finger on one side and then my thumb on the other side. So there's like a triangle grip in a way. So once you have a firm grip, place it on your surface, and I recommend holding the domino pretty close to the bottom. My middle finger is actually touching the floor surface. And this is gonna help you stabilize the domino when you place it, because if I were to hold the domino, say from the top of it, it's much more likely to wobble when I let it go. But if you hold it closer to the bottom where it's about to be balanced, then you'll have a much better grip. So once the domino is placed, just release your fingers and then it's set up. Now, don't overthink the grip or the release of your fingers that much. Just practice placing the domino and letting go and making sure that your fingers, once they touch the surface, they kind of just open up without touching the domino. Because if I were to release but then I touch the domino, it could move like this. So when I release my fingers, it's just a fluid motion, right? Keep practicing that. So once you feel really comfortable with placing the domino, take another domino and add to the domino line. And the spacing should be at minimum 1 domino thickness, which is about 8 millimeters, to maximum 1 centimeter, which is about 0.4 inches. So just to visualize this, if I were to take another domino and put it in between the two dominoes, that should roughly be the distance in between dominoes. So just make sure you're very consistent with this. Take another domino, keep on placing it. When you're building, you want to be very precise. Build slowly and make sure it looks pretty neat. So if I were to trace one side of the domino and the other side of the domino, those would make parallel lines, meaning there wouldn't be a domino angled like this. There wouldn't be any offset dominoes like this that would break the parallel line. There wouldn't be any dominoes that are spaced too far apart. Make sure the dominoes look really even, really consistent between one domino to the next, and you'll be good to go. Now, if you find yourself in a position where you need to build the dominoes from front to back rather than side to side, I hold the domino with my index finger on one side and my thumb on the other. And the domino is placed in the same way. My hand is still on the bottom, so it's touching the table, and then I can slowly release. And now knocking down the dominoes is simple. Just tap the first domino. So now you know how to build a domino line. Let's make a domino curve. So say I'm building a domino line like this and I want to make it turn. Now it's super simple. Just take your dominoes and instead of putting it straight, we're going to angle the domino very slightly by rotating it. So you'll see here, there's a gap on either side. There's a wide gap and then there's a shorter gap. The gap on the wider side is a little bit larger than a domino thickness, and the shorter gap is a little bit less than 1 domino thickness. Make sure that the domino isn't touching the domino and that it isn't too far away. We want the spacing to be still fairly close, similar to the 8 millimeter spacing, except now it's a little bit offset. So once you have that, take another domino and angle it the same way, the same amount of distance. Now, a general rule when you're making 90-degree turns is using 4 dominoes in the turn. So for example, these red dominoes are all angled dominoes, and each of these angles are equal. If it falls in this direction, it'll turn 90 degrees, and then officially become a new straight line like this. Just make sure that these angled dominoes all look very even. They have the same amount of angle from one domino to the next. So for example, you wouldn't have dominoes that are like this, that are offset. You wouldn't have dominoes that are maybe too far angled like this. You want to keep it all really consistent, really even. The most important thing with turns is making sure that the angle isn't too sharp. So that's why we use at least 4 dominoes minimum in the curve. That'll ensure that the whole domino line will fall properly. So make any adjustments if you need to, and then you should be good. Next, I'll teach you how to build split-offs. So this will allow you to have a domino line expand into 2 lines or 3 lines or even 4 lines. So you can get a little bit more complicated with your projects and make it more interesting. So to make a split-off, we want to first start out with a normal domino line, and then it's really simple. Take 2 dominoes, put them together, and place it right in front of the next one. And this spacing should also be about 8 millimeters or 1 domino thickness apart. So you can kind of see where this is going. One domino line will hit 2 dominoes, which are right in front of it, and then that can split to make even more domino lines. So if I make this split off even bigger, I can have a domino curve, and then I can take 2 more, put them together, and put it right in front of the next one. And now it splits into 4 lines, which I can then make more domino curves come off of that. Now you could keep expanding on this and going on and on forever, but I want to knock this down and we'll move on to the next trick. Now let's build a domino triangle. Building off of the split off technique, it's super easy. You start with 1 domino, and then the next row you place 2. This is still 8 millimeter spacing. And then the next row, let's place 3 dominoes. Now if you look carefully at the domino triangle, every row that we place is offset by half a domino compared to the row next to it, which means that every other row you place will be in line with itself. So row 3 and row 1, like this domino and this domino, is along the same line. Now let's keep building this triangle even bigger. Sometimes I find that it helps to use some sort of straight edge as you're building these domino rows. So for example, I have this really long row. I can take a straight edge or even a template, which comes with my new H5 domino creation set, flip it around and move this row very slowly into place. Let's knock it down. And finally, I want to share one last building tip that will help save your projects in case you accidentally knock it down, and that is safety gaps. So say I'm building a domino line like this. Say there's like 200 more dominoes next to this, but I accidentally bump it. Oh no! And it falls over. It would be so sad if all of these hundreds of dominoes next to it fell over. I just watched it fall and there was nothing I can do. But there is something you can do. What I can do is take out 5 dominoes in the row and make a safety gap. So if I knock it down by accident, it'll stop at the gap and all of these dominoes next to it will be safe. Now, for more slippery floors, you might have to take out more dominoes, like 6 dominoes. Just do some tests. Make sure that when you knock it down, it won't hit the next domino. But safety gaps will save you so much when you're setting up dominoes. You can make as many safety gaps as you want in your project, whatever you feel comfortable with when you're building. If I'm scared that something will knock over, I will make a safety gap and then I don't need to worry about it anymore. I don't recommend putting the dominoes inside the gap because the domino line could actually hit the stack and knock it into the next domino. So make sure you leave the gap open and that way it'll actually stop. You just need to remember at the very end when you're done your project, fill in that gap with those dominoes. Safety gaps are always super scary to fill in, so just be especially careful when you're setting these up. And there we go. Now just remember, patience is key. Building dominoes does take a little bit of time and a lot of practice. Be really neat, be precise, just go really slow, especially if you're just starting out with building dominoes, and keep an eye out for dominoes that might be a little bit offset or too far apart. Additionally, perseverance is key. It's okay if something doesn't work. It's okay if you knock it down by accident. It's all part of the domino building process, and that happens to me like every time I go and start building. Even as a professional, it's okay. Honestly, I'm so thankful for my fails because I've learned so much from them. Always analyze your domino projects, embrace your fails, and try to engineer that and become a better builder that way. Have fun building. I wish you all the best with your domino projects.